All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Bearded Gear podcast. It's just me again. This is going to be a solo one, no guest this time. So if you don't like me, you came to the wrong podcast. I have some catching up to do. It's been a month since I put a podcast live. I typically was doing these weekly. Life has gotten a little crazy. We'll talk a little bit about that. I'll give what details I can. But yeah, my last episode was episode 28 with Metal Complex. This is episode 29. We're creeping up on 30 here, and I have some fun ones somewhat arranged. I've been talking to some people that I think are going to be exciting guests and fun guests, insightful people to talk to that are committed to coming on soon. So there's going to be some more episodes in the near future, which is good. The podcast is honestly probably my favorite part of having the YouTube channel at this point. Don't get me wrong, I love reviewing knives and the videos that I make in general. I'm very much enjoying making, but the podcast is fun. I'm not short for words usually. It's therapeutic in some ways, I think, for me to have the space to speak kind of long form, and then also the conversations that I get to have when I do have a guest on. I've learned a ton from people. I've been able to make friends by having them on the podcast, and yeah, it's a lot of insightful, good conversation that I think is not only fun for me as a person, but hopefully makes me a better reviewer as I continue to learn more and all that. So anyway, this is episode 29. It's just me. I don't have any kind of fancy title for it or anything. Maybe I'll think of one afterwards, but just going to kind of go through the updates on myself and what's been going on with me that's made content creation a little bit fewer and farther between. And then I'll talk a little bit about the USN show. I wrote down just some notes of things to make sure I remembered it to bring up because I went to the USN show. This was just a couple of weeks ago now. I'll talk a little bit about Blade Show West and California Custom Knife Show. Those are coming up. So kind of my expectations for those shows. I want to give an update on my Hawk Deadlock because a lot of people are curious about that knife. And yeah, I'll give an update. We'll get there when we get there. I want to talk a little bit about how knife buying has changed for me in recent time, like my buying patterns and habits and what I'm looking for and all of that. And then I'll end by talking a little bit about merch, like channel merch, because I have a Teespring shop. I have some Hanks that if you're watching this when it goes live on Friday, tomorrow, if you're watching this on Friday, I'm not recording it on Friday, but anyway, Saturday, the what is the date for that? I think it's the 18th. That sounds right. Saturday. Let me make sure I'm not an idiot. Saturday, the 18th. Yes. On renegadeprovisionsco.com. Some collaboration Hanks are going live. And that's my first like collaboration project for like a merch related thing. If you're watching this on YouTube, I'll hold one up right now because they look freaking sweet. It's my Mountain Beard logo that Nick Rogers from Niche Designs put together for me. They've got leather tags. They're microfiber backed. The stitching work is phenomenal. The graphic is excellent. They're really cool. And so I'm kind of, it's got me thinking about whether I want to do more merch. I've thought about doing hats before. I went so far as getting samples made. Anyway, we'll talk about that at the end. But we'll start with kind of updates on me. I mentioned in a video a couple weeks ago now. It was the one where I was kicking off my 8K giveaway, which just before recording this tonight, I went live and I picked the winner for that and some winners for some other things during the live. And so in that video where I kicked off the giveaway, I talked about how I'd made the decision, myself and with my wife, that I'm going to look for a new full-time job. Prior to doing YouTube, I always had a full-time job. That was what I needed to survive. But in the meantime, there came a time, I should say, where during the pandemic, I had gone back to work for a little bit and then got furloughed again because things were slow or whatever, and then had the opportunity to go back again, and I decided not to. And I've just been doing a YouTube channel, this whole thing. I was getting a lot done for Left Concepts with the Avant. And on top of all that, it made me much more available to do a lot of the photography content that my wife needs because she does social media influencing and I shoot most of her photos. So by me being way more available, it gave me way more time, or it gave her a lot more ability to say yes to more work. And financially, we made that work and make sense. But as the world continues to shift back into normalcy or whatever you want to call it, and as we've kind of been evaluating our goals and what we want our next steps to be and all that, I think it would make most sense for me to go back to work. But I've been kind of slow rolling that in some ways. I've been trying to just have meaningful conversations, rather than just like shooting my resume out to a bunch of places or anything like that. I've been talking to people that I already know, or who I have some kind of connection with, and seeing what's out there that I'd actually be more enthusiastic about doing than just taking another job like I have in the past. I have a history in car sales and then in aftermarket, still in sales, but in automotive. And yeah, most of my adult like career life history has been in sales in one form or another. And I don't really like sales that much. So I'm thinking something more in the marketing realm, hopefully something where I can uh, include a video making element, or podcasting or some kind of like being able to bring in these things that I've been working so hard on for the last while now. Um, but yeah, I don't know whether that will be in the knife industry or outside of the knife industry or what, but I'm having some conversations around it. And I'm excited at the potential of doing something more marketing related and less sales related, and hopefully finding a better balance than I have in the past. I've just never been that excited about what I've done professionally. Every job ultimately is about the money, but a lot of them, that it hasn't been like a match made in heaven. So I'm hoping that whatever I do next will still be. And with that said, I still intend to keep the channel going. I don't know that there will be daily video uploads. That's probably a little bit unrealistic, depending on what the job may end up being. Um, but yeah, it will probably have to slow down. It will probably take the back seat a little bit, especially during a transition phase. But I do intend to keep it going. I do intend to keep reviewing knives. It's not just what I've been doing like for monetization on YouTube. That's very, very little income, by the way. If any of you are wondering how much money it makes to be a channel with 8,000 subscribers and daily uploads, it's not a staggering amount, not even close. At best, it's been a side hustle, but um, it is also my hobby doing this, and the world of knives, even if I wasn't to continue reviewing them, would be still a place where I'd be an active participant. So yeah, I'll keep making videos, and I'll hopefully also keep doing the podcast, because like I mentioned, the podcast is kind of my favorite part. So that'll all be a reality. The other element to that I mentioned in my video before was that I'm also looking at this point at the potential of taking a job outside of California, which is the first time I've ever really opened my horizons to places outside of this state. My wife in particular has always felt really tied here because of family. Both of our families are here. Sorry if my family is listening to this, but it's much more that she's unwilling to leave the state for hers. Um, but yeah, so now with just the way things are and the way life has progressed, it's she's open to it if the right opportunity is out there. So I'm looking outside of California as well, which is exciting. And to have that conversation with friends who live in other states has been cool to see what they're aware of, and what's going on and all that. So that's kind of the update there. I don't have any more specifics because I haven't made any decisions and nothing has been done yet. But I'm putting a lot of feelers out there and I'm having interesting conversations. So let's switch gears a little bit. I'll talk about USN. I did a video highlighting the knives that I bought at USN when I got back, and I talked a little bit about the show there, but I figured I'll give kind of a rundown of how it went. I know quite a few people probably haven't ever been to USN, especially like this might sound weird, but in my subscriber base, yeah, the type of show that USN is, I feel like is pretty unique compared to like I haven't been to Blade Show yet, but I hear it's pretty different. And the only other real show I'd been to in any meaningful way has been California Custom Knife Show, and USN is very different from that. And so USN is a show that I think a lot of people are probably a little bit curious about. In years past, I always assumed you had to be a USN member to go to the USN show. And if you're not even familiar with what USN is, it's a group called the Usual Suspects Network. And it's kind of like a forum, from what I understand. I still haven't joined it. But yeah, it's like a forum-based, knife-specific community. And my wife is printing something. Sorry for that sound. That's terrible. I hope that that's not as loud for you as it is in my headphones. Anyway, so the USN The Gathering is what they call it. Happens annually in Las Vegas. And yeah, I assumed it was always just for USN members. Come to find out, you can just buy a ticket and you can go. I think the ticket was $25 when I bought it. I got it pretty early. If you got it like right before, it might have been $10 more or whatever, but pretty inexpensive. Obviously, if you're not in Vegas already, then you have to pay to get to Vegas and to stay there and all that. So it's like the ticket seems pretty insignificant if you're also including travel, but yeah, it was relatively inexpensive in terms of entry to the show. And I'd heard a lot of people for years now say that USN The Gathering was their favorite knife show. And I kind of can see why. From what I understand, this was my first year. Attendance was pretty low this year compared to years past, which makes sense with COVID and all that nonsense that's going on. It makes things different. That's the reality right now. But there were still quite a few people there. So the way I worked it out, I went with a buddy. I went with Nick Rogers from Niche Designs. I think I already mentioned him because I held up the Hank and he did the graphic that's on that Hank for me. You might also know him because he has knife design work that has been out there. He's got some production stuff coming, which is cool. And yeah, cool dude. So if you're not familiar with Nick Rogers, you should become familiar with him. Niche Designs on Instagram, and his website is Niche Designs and all that. Great dude. He's a buddy. We had met up a few times in person before this. So I didn't just commit to sharing a hotel room with somebody I wasn't already very well familiar, but like we'd been on hikes together and we've met up just to talk knives and swap things and stuff like that. So we departed on Thursday. I left from here. He lives right on the way to Vegas from my house. So I picked him up and we drove up to Vegas. It's only from my place, it's under 4 hours, probably 3.5. From his place, it's like 3 hours flat. So we got there pretty quick. Stayed the first night at the Aria because he had like some points or whatever. He had a free hotel room there, and that's right across the street from Planet Hollywood where the show is. So we checked in, walked across, got our passes, got dinner, and then the night before the show, because they've got registration that day and all that, they open up what they call the Cove, or Trader's Cove, I think they call it. Everyone just calls it the Cove. And the Cove is the place to be at USN The Gathering. From what I hear of Blade Show, it's kind of like the Pit. The Cove is probably smaller, but it's like this bar that it's not even really a bar. It's basically like an area upstairs above the casino that you can only get into if you are attending the show. You have to have your show pass to get in to this. It's not even a room. It's like a couple of rooms. I don't know why I'm trying so hard to describe what it's like up there, but you go up there and there is a small bar up there. People are ordering drinks and stuff, and everyone just hangs out there from like 7 o'clock until, I think they put on the thing, like from 7 o'clock to very late. It's like people stay as long as they want, basically. And so that first night we hung out there, and right before going in, we bumped into Benny Belkin from Jack Wolf Knives. Started talking to him, and his buddy Cole was there, and Cole was helping him to run his table. He had a booth there at the show, and so we were hanging out with them for a while. And then their other friend, Corey, was on his way and hadn't gotten there yet, but he ended up getting there while we were hanging out in the Cove. So the first night we just kind of hung out with them. We had like a standing table that we were hanging out around, and we just chatted with them until pretty late. I drank a lot of ginger ale and we called it good. After a while, they went to get some food. I don't know, it's probably like midnight, and we were like, we're just both ready to call it a night. We were getting up early for the show the next morning. And so one other key tidbit that happened while we were there that night is Gavin Hawk I spotted, and I was like, that's Gavin Hawk. And then they were like, you should go talk to him, because I was thinking about getting a Hawk Deadlock. And so I did. I ran over to him and I was like, dude, huge fan. Like, I remember watching their shop tour video from Blade HQ from like years ago. Grant and Gavin Hawk are just really cool knife makers. And so I asked him, I was like, I'd seen on Instagram, you're planning on bringing some of the Model C. Will there be any that are first come, first serve? Or like, how's that going to work out? And he's like, yeah, definitely there will be some first come, first serve. I was like, sweet, I'm going to rush over to your table. And then he handed me his personal Deadlock Model C that was in his pocket so that I could check it out. And it was like, bing, yep, I'm doing it. Like I need to have one of these for myself. So that was cool. And then flashback forward, Benny and Corey and Cole, they go to get some food. We go back to the Aria so we can fall asleep. Because we had planned on, we didn't get there super early. The show opened at 10, which is nice, because if it opens at like 6, then people are going to be freaking lining up outside at 2 or whatever. So it opened at 10, and we planned on getting to the show at about 8 to stand in line in case there was a long line, because there were things that I wanted to run in and grab, both of which I got, by the way, which is awesome. But yeah, so we go at 8:00 a.m. We wake up. I already had all my stuff packed because I had booked a room for us the next night in Planet Hollywood, because that's where the show was. And instead of like 50-50ing each room, we just each booked a night. In hindsight, it would have been way simpler to have stayed in one hotel the whole time. That was kind of a curveball. But anyway, we had all our stuff basically packed up. So we got up, jumped up, grabbed our bags, checked out of the Aria, drove over to Planet Hollywood, parked the car there with all the stuff in it, which was the scary part, just like in some Vegas parking structure. Luckily, it all went fine. Nothing got stolen out of the car or anything, but I had like all of my camera equipment and my laptop and my knife case with tons of nice knives in it and all that just in the back of the car. So we lock that in, and then we go and just get in line for the show. So we waited for a couple hours, made friends with the people around us in line, because it's all knife dudes, which was awesome. So we were just chatting with people, hanging out, waiting for the show, and I'm getting itchy minute by minute, waiting to see if I'm going to end up getting a Deadlock when I get in, because that was number 1 on my hit list. And ultimately, doors open, I bolt right over to the Hawk table, and I snagged one. I wanted a plain Jane, as vanilla as it got, Deadlock Model C, and table price was $1,000, which is kind of a lot, but it felt worth it and right. And luckily, I'd already handled Gavin's the night before, so there was no hesitation. And I just pulled the trigger. I got it. And then that was like literally within the first 2 minutes of the show. I had exchanged the money, had the knife, and was walking away from their table. And the other things that were on my list, there were 2 that were kind of like head to head for what else I wanted. And I'd sold enough knives before going that I had enough to buy one more really meaningful thing, I should say. And the 2 other knives, by happenstance, were like literally basically the same price. So I run over to the skiff table, and I see that they've got some drifters, and that was one of the things on the list. And so I was like, great, what is table price on the more basic drifters that you've got here? And they had a couple options right at $900. That was as cheap as it got. It was actually $895, but great, $900 for a drifter. And I knew there was one that I wanted most, but there was one that was real similar to it I would have settled for. And so I took the risk, and I ran over to the NCC Knives table. I think he was actually sharing a table with Robert Carter Knives. They're related in some way, I assume. I actually don't know much about them, but I've been seeing the BBM a lot on Instagram. I have some friends who have them. I follow them, and I see every time they finish a build, they post one, and it's always not available. A gorgeous, really cool looking knife. And so I handled the couple that were on the table that were first come, first serve at the price that I was willing to pay, which also was like literally $900. It's like it's so 50-50 between these 2 knives. But I handled the drifter before walking over, and then I got over there and I handled the BBM, and it was like I really could have gone either way and been super, super happy. But something about the drifter just felt a little more like that's what I should go and grab. So I did. I walked away from the NCC Knives table, walked back over to the skiff table, and this was all literally under 10 minutes of the show even being open. I had bought the Hawk, I'd been to each of those tables, and then got back to the Skiff table. And I think I was their first purchase of the day as well. So that was really cool. I bought my Drifter, and then I had spent virtually every dollar that I brought to spend. And so the whole rest of the show was kind of relieving in some ways that I had I had done all of the buying that I was there to do, and the rest of the time I could just take it in and see what was on people's tables without feeling any need or compulsion. Like, I was happy. I was fulfilled with what I had put in my fanny pack that I'd already purchased. And so now there was no like, oh, but now, should I make it work? It was like, I got what I need. Now I can just check everything out. I can observe, I can talk to makers, I can have a good time. And so I did. It was a great time. That whole first day of the show, it's a big enough show that I had walked by every single table at least once. And there were multiple tables that I came back to talk to somebody that I'd missed or whatever. Um, but I had seen just about everything without like looking at stuff that I didn't have any interest in. Like, there were tables that I kind of scanned and walked right by because it just wasn't my speed. But everything that I wanted to make sure I saw on day one, I did. And then, yeah, at like 4 o'clock was our check-in time at that hotel. And if you're familiar with how Vegas works, at least in these two hotels that we stayed in, the South Park is nowhere near where you check in for a hotel. So Nick and I, at like 4 o'clock, we went and we huffed it all the way over to where the car was, grabbed our bags. I brought all my camera gear too, just in case I wanted to film anything. I didn't want to be there and feel underprepared. So I brought like literally this whole extra really heavy backpack with my camera and my laptop and my microphone and like tripod and all this stuff that I just didn't end up even touching while I was there. But anyways, we huff all that to the check-in area. We check in, go drop the stuff off at the room. And then by that point, Nick was super tired because we'd just spent the whole day at the show and we'd gotten up fairly early. Not that early, but we got up a little early to do it. And so he hung out in the hotel room. And I went back down to the show for the last like hour, talked to some more people, hung out. And then we went and I feel like we grabbed dinner. No, we didn't, because we had gotten lunch that day or something. I don't know. We went, basically the next step for us, Nick and I, was to grab our knife cases, which we brought, and bring them down with us to the Cove, which was a lot of fun because I just brought my 20 knife case, my cutlery shop one that holds 20. I've got another cutlery shop case that holds 40, and then I've got some vault cases and stuff. And but I brought the 20 knife case with just like kind of my top-ish 20 knives. And Nick brought a vault case with a bunch of his collection, and we just went and we got there like right when the Cove like opened for the day too, so that we could get an actual table with chairs that time. And we just like took a spot, and I grabbed a Red Bull and we hung out. And then Benny and Corey and Cole came over again. Shout out to Cole, by the way. I freaking love that guy. Shout out to all of them, but Cole is freaking awesome. He's like my spirit animal, I guess. Anyway, so they all come down, we're hanging out, and they're checking out my knives and Nick's knives, and we're checking out what's in their pockets. And it was just fun to have knife cases around. Everyone's handling stuff and asking questions. And like, there's also this like pride I have in my own collection, of course, because they're the knives that I picked and that I like and that have stuck around for a reason. And so it's fun to talk knives with a bunch of just knife people around. And then Lindy and Richie from Knife Modders, those of you who know them, they were at the show, and I had made a point to say hi to them at the show. They got there that afternoon. So at the end of the day, I'd said hi to them, but then we saw them come up into the Cove. So I ran over, grabbed them, said, come sit with us. And they did. They hung out with us for hours at that table, just hanging out, talking about what they got at the show. We all got at the show, handling knives. It was fun. Handing the Avant to people the whole show was a blast, seeing what people thought of it and just getting feedback from the people who, some of whom purchased it, some of whom are people that I look up to in the knife world. Like, I can talk a little bit more about that, I guess. But anyway, so Lindy and Richie hang out with us. We've got this table full of people, and there were other random people that would come hang out with us for a little bit that I didn't even know. Shout out to any of you who were there. Not saying like I big time that they would know who I was. They didn't know who I was either, but we just had this table and we were hanging out, having fun. And then Sanford Owen from MBK, Monterey Bay Knives, was there with Lindy and Richie. And so he ended up coming over to our table and hanging out for a little bit. He was super fun to talk to. I really enjoyed that conversation. And it was just fun, just chatting knives with people. It was arguably more fun than any part of the show. And it was also exciting for me too, because I'm showing people my existing like knife collection. And then I've got this new Hawk Deadlock Auto and this Skiff Drifter that I had just picked up that day that I'm excited to be playing with. And like, it was just a lot of fun. So yeah, we did that until pretty late. And then I ended up grabbing dinner with Benny and Cole and Corey and a couple of their buddies whose names I can't remember now, but we just grabbed dinner down there in the hotel at Planet Hollywood, some restaurant, and went to bed, got up the next day, did day 2 of the show, which I had been told from a number of people, like Friday is the day that's worth being there. Saturday, most of the stuff that's meaningful was purchased the day before. And like some of the makers won't even necessarily be there again that day, and there's just less going on. But it was actually a pretty great day at the show. So first of all, some of the makers held back a number of pieces for day 2, like Keenison Knives did that. And Brian at Keenison, I got to chat with a lot while I was there. He's been on the podcast. I consider him a friend. And I spent quite a bit of time at the Keenison table chatting with them. Shout out to them. But they held some knives back. And there were a number of notable makers that specifically held back like half of their knives for the show that were either first come, first serve, or lotteries, or auction. And they held them for day 2, which was pretty cool for people who couldn't come to the show on day 1 or who missed their lotteries on day 1. And there's another chance to enter more lotteries the next day. It was cool that there were some makers who did that. So the show was definitely less people there than there were on Friday, but Saturday was still a great show day. And then I ended up, huge shout out to Chris from Knife Joy. I got to hang out with him for like a couple hours that day. And Chris over at Knife Joy is friends with Enrique Pena. So I got to like walk the show and hang out with Enrique Pena and Chris from Knife Joy for hours. Like it was really, really cool. Because Knife Joy is a dealer that I've liked for a very long time and I've had great experiences buying from. And I've felt kind of like I know them and that they're really cool. And Chris is the owner of Knife Joy. And so it was really cool to hang out. And then Enrique Pena is a guy whose knives I've loved for quite a while. His work I admire. And that was one of those things that was like, it's worth mentioning to be able to hand the Avant, the prototype that I had in my pocket the whole show, to be able to hand it to Enrique Pena and have him take a few minutes to look at it, play with it, feel it out, and see his reaction, and then hear what he had to say about it, was really, really cool and kind of humbling and just like a unique experience. And I did the same thing with Richard Rogers at his table. I was chatting with him for a little while and asked him if he'd be willing or interested to handle my prototype. And he said, sure. And he's very kind about it. And it was one of those things where like for the first minute, he looked at it, he flicked it a couple of times, and then somebody came up to the table and they were talking to him for a minute and he was still holding it. And I was like, oh, good, he's not done looking at it yet. And then the table kind of cleared away and it was a slower day, which was played in my favor in this moment. And then for another couple minutes, he was looking at it and he was peeking inside and just feeling it out. And the most common thing that people say about the Avant is how lightweight it is when they first hold it. But it was really cool to hear feedback from makers like Enrique Pena and Richard Rogers and Brian from Keenison, and to have them handle and talk about a knife that I co-designed is a big thing. That was really, really cool for me. So yeah, that's more meaningful to me than like meeting a celebrity or something. I don't know. These are people whose work I genuinely appreciate and is meaningful to me. So that was cool. But yeah, so we hung out at the show for a good while that second day. We didn't stay until the end. We'd had to check out of the hotel by like 11 or whatever. So we ended up just in the beginning of the morning taking our bags to the car again checking out and then going to the show so that we didn't have to worry about getting back in time for checkout time or whatever. So a little bit after noon, we basically were like, all right, we're just going to head out. So we said our goodbyes to everybody who was there at the show. Made sure, like, I ran back to the Hawk booth, talked to Gavin a little bit more, bought a Hawk Knives shirt, which was really cool. And yeah, we just like crossed all our T's, dotted all of our I's. Then we hopped in the car, grabbed a lunch, headed back home. And it was a great show. It was genuinely a really, really good show. I think it was different than I was expecting it to be in a number of ways. So the idea I had of the show before going was it's like all tactical guys. And there was a lot of tactical dudes there. I'm not saying that to belittle the guys who wear a lot of camo and have molly straps on everything and are really into patches a lot of the time, and like they're into tactical knives, fighting style knives, stuff like that. A lot of like big Strider fans were there. That's a big show for Strider and Dwyer and all that stuff. There was certainly a lot of that, but there was also like, I don't know, there was no shortage of stuff that I was interested in, even though a lot of that like overly tactical stuff isn't what I buy. It's still fun for me to look at. And then there was a lot of stuff that was absolutely what I'm super into. There were a lot of knives there that if I hadn't gotten the Hawk and the Drifter, I would have purchased, and would have been easy for me to do so. Like just really, really cool turnout from makers. And it's funny too, because this being my first time going, I heard murmurings of like, oh, there's several notable makers who like didn't come this year, blah, blah, blah. And like, I don't know, maybe it would have been cooler with them, but I felt like it was an awesome turnout in terms of who had tables and what knives they put on them. So yeah, I think if you haven't been to USN and it's something you're curious about, or you just like knife shows, or you think it would be fun or whatever, like you don't have to be a USN member. I wasn't. I just bought a ticket and they let me in just fine. So that hurdle isn't the thing. And B, it's a cool show. And there were plenty of people that were definitely my speed of what I look for in knives. And the energy of the show, the way that the people were there was really cool. It didn't feel super like clicky or exclusive or weird, or like it was just like a bunch of knife guys, and it was a proper like kind of community event. And there was a lot of really cool custom stuff, like a lot of really cool custom stuff, and a little bit of production stuff. ProTech was there, Microtech was there, Spyderco was there, Reich Knife was there, Spartan was there. They had some of their production stuff. The Tactile Knife Co guys were there. There was a lot of like stuff kind of at every level, which was nice. A lot of those shows that seem kind of custom focused too, I would worry if I was going without a ton of money that I would feel like there's nothing there for me. And you could go to that show with like a couple $100 and get something really cool, or even $100. Like go to the Spyderco booth. They had factory seconds. Were like a crazy good deal. I didn't pick any up because I was buying other stuff while I was there, but yeah, like there was a lot of really cool stuff there. So that was my experience at USN. Now, to segue, I realized just now I took a long time to talk about that. Probably lost some people. Sorry, those of you who are lost. Anyway, the shows that are upcoming now are Blade West and CCKS, California Custom Knife Show. So California Custom Knife Show, I've been to, I think 3 times now consecutively. I went, what would that have been? Moving backwards, I went to 2020, which was outdoors and different because it was 2020. And then I went to 2019 and 2018. And the one in 2018 was my first like kind of real knife show, if you want to call it that. I don't know what makes a knife show fake. I had been to gun shows a lot where there were knives growing up. And then I had been to, there was one really small knife show years before that. And it bugs me to this day. I don't remember what it was called, but it was in Pasadena, which is like where I live, at the Pasadena Convention Center. And my dad found out about it and like sent me a link and was like, hey, there's this knife show happening. I'm going to come out to it. It's right by you. Will you go with me? And I was like, sure. And I went to it with him. But that even like compared to CCKS would have been less than half the size. And like, I don't know. It was interesting. So anyway, been to CCKS now 3 times. This year will be the 4th time. Blade Show West, I've never been to. I've never even been to Blade Show, period. The one in Atlanta, by all reports, is always the bigger, the best one. It's the Blade Show, right? But I've heard good things about Blade West for the last few years. The way I understand it, it's been up in Portland, and this year they've moved it to Long Beach. It says on the site right now that there will be certain COVID restrictions that they'll have to deal with. So you'll either have to be vaccinated or prove a negative test within 3 days, or I don't know how strict that's actually going to be or what. That's a thing that I'm sure will keep some people from coming. I don't know what it's going to be like, but I'm excited that it's in Long Beach, right in my backyard. So I'm going to go. And it seems like from the exhibitor list that I've seen so far, it's going to be pretty rad. And a lot of people seem to be planning on coming, at least from what I see in my Instagram world. So I guess in terms of expectations for these shows, I'm not totally sure. I imagine, I guess in my head, Blade West will probably be my expectation about the size of USN that I just came from, because like it's not going to be giant like Blade Show in Atlanta, but maybe it'll be bigger than USN. I don't know. I'm excited to see what it is. The most exciting part about that for me is that Ryan, my partner from Left Concepts, is flying in, and we're staying at a hotel right there next to the show. Even though I live close, I'm going to grab him from the airport. We're going to go to the show. We're going to stay at the hotel there that night. We'll do the show again the next morning, and then I'll have to take him back to the airport. But it'll be the first time that I get to meet Ryan not on StreamYard or Zoom, which is very exciting. We've talked so much over the last year plus in getting Left Concepts. It's become a reality. We have a knife that 300 people ordered, and that our production has like we've made our deposit and we're on the books, and it's happening. Like a lot has clearly happened between Ryan and I for us to have never met in person. So that's going to be really, really fun that I'll get to do the show with him, and we'll get to have that time in person together instead of just messaging and calling and video calling. So that'll be really cool. We'll both be there. We'll both have Avant prototypes in our pocket. We'll both have a bunch of Left Concept stickers and stuff. We'll probably be wearing Left Concept shirts, and we'll be ready to hang out and talk with people and show the prototypes to those who want to see them, and it'll be fun. And we both have friends who will be displaying at the show and that kind of stuff. So we're really looking forward to that for that reason. So if nothing else, that's the most exciting thing about Blade West for me. And then CCKS, I don't know. I guess my expectation is probably that it'll be relatively similar to what it was last year. Like the first 2 years I went to CCKS, they hold it at, I think it's an Embassy Suites, something like that type of hotel. They hold it in their like convention room, or they held it in their convention room, and it's a decent sized show. It's in like a hotel convention area, and there's quite a few knife companies and knife makers that are here in Southern California. So you get a decent turnout from people there displaying, and some people travel in for it. And it was a fun show always for me. The first year I went, I bought my first Olamic Wayfarer. That was super fun. The second year that I went, I'm trying to remember if I bought anything. I don't remember if I did or not. I think I might have just looked at a bunch of stuff. I remember almost buying a Koenig Mini Goblin with a micarta show side, and I think it was a DLC blade, and I've kicked myself 1,000 times for not buying that knife. Yeah, I don't know why I didn't, but I should have. And anyway, so those first 2 years was indoors, was in that space, and it was nice. It was a good show. Not huge, not crazy, but good. Especially for being so convenient to get to for me. And then last year they held it outdoors, open air because of COVID. And there were certainly less people, both in terms of exhibitors and attendees, but it was still a decent turnout. I had plenty of friends there. It was fun. That's actually, I think, the second time. Yeah, I had met Nick Rogers from Niche Designs once before that in person. But then we hung out like all day at that show last year. And we hung out with Christian from Cerberus, who's become a friend since, Jacob Ginsberg from Jacob Creates, who's become a friend since. Nickel Trevor on Instagram was there. We hung out. I think the other guy was, I want to say his Instagram is Burrow EDC. I always forget. Anyway, we hung out with these guys like pretty much all day. Alex from Alex's Knife Box was there, hung out with him a decent bit. Dirk Werning from Dirk Werning YouTube was there. And so it was fun. We hung out like all day with a bunch of these people that were friends, and it was a fun show in that way. I bought my Microtech Stitch at that show. I feel like I bought something else too, but now I don't remember. I'd have to look back. But yeah, it was a good show. And so I'm hoping that this year is at least just the same. Maybe it will be more people. I think knife makers and knife companies are probably kind of itching to do knife shows a little bit more, I'm hoping, than last year, because there just haven't been as many opportunities with things getting shut down and stuff. And knife shows are fun, and they're a good opportunity for a lot of these makers to sell knives. So yeah, we'll see what actually happens with those. But those are both within the next like month and a half, I think. Blade West is towards the beginning of October, and then CCKS is towards the end of October. So yeah, here we are in mid-September. Yeah, those are coming up. So that'll be fun. If you guys will be there at those shows, then say hi. It'll be fun. All right. So after that, I said that I would do an update on my Hawk Deadlock, and not because there's like an issue or anything crazy. I guess it's kind of an issue if you want to call it that, but really something cool has kind of happened. So I did one video showing that was one of the things I bought at USN along with the Drifter. And then that knife ended up in another video that I made where I was comparing some OTFs. And for that video, I got out my Guardian Tactical Recon 35, my Microtech Troodon, my Microtech Hera, which I just recently got, and the Deadlock. And I talked through kind of my experience with OTFs in general and centered it around those knives, but talked about kind of my journey as I've gone through OTFs and finally arrived at the Hawk Deadlock Model C. And in that video, I talked about how I'd always been told that Hawk autos, both the Model B and now the Model C, have no blade play. And everyone always says that's the craziest thing about them. There's no blade play. And I admitted in that video, because I want to be honest and open, that my Model C had the slightest bit of wiggle. It just wasn't like bank vault locked up, no play. It didn't feel like a fixed blade. That means no play, right? And so I was honest about that. I was like, it's less play by a mile than I've ever felt on any other OTF. Like, it is demonstrably better in that department. But I said that it would be dishonest for me to say that there's zero blade play, like so many people say. And so I just chalked that up to like the excitement of there being an OTF with such little blade play that people are calling it zero or something, right? But no, so I send that video to Gavin Hawk just on their Instagram, just like out of habit. When I do a video that features something that a maker made or whatever, I like to send them the link, because for me, like when the Avant starts landing, I hope people will send me their videos and pictures of the Avant. Like that's meaningful to me. You know, I want the feedback. I want the validation. I want whatever you want to call it. That's exciting. So I send him a link to the video, and he's like, all right, sweet, I'll watch it in a little bit. And then a little bit later, I get a message from him, and he's like, hey, I'm only part way through the video. I'm going to finish it in a little bit. But he's like, there should be no blade play, zero. He's like, that's not just a talking point. It's not like that. He's like, there should be none on it. And I was like, got it. I was like, that's excellent to hear. I was like, but mine just has like the slightest wiggle. I was like, honestly, it doesn't even really bother me that much. It's just like the slightest wiggle. And he was like, send it in, and I'll make it none. I'll make it no blade play. And I just thought that was really cool that he took the time to actually watch the video, then took the time to actually respond. And I wasn't mad. I didn't like send him the video like, hey, you said no blade play or anything like that. I was loving the knife. In fact, I put that knife in the mail the other day now, and I have missed it every single day. That knife doesn't like fit the typical primary knife mold for me. Like, it's not a deep carry clip at all whatsoever. It's an OTF. It's double-edged. It's not like the thinnest, sliceiest little blade for processing cardboard or anything, but there are some things about that knife that just make it so much fun compared to anything else. And I was carrying it virtually every day, at least for part of the day, and just playing with it constantly. And it wasn't even beginning to get old or boring in any way. After having it for a few days and just nonstop carrying it, playing with it, cutting stupid things with it, I was adoring it. And I have missed it more than any knife that I've had to send to loan to anybody. Or it's not like I've sent knives out for warranty work, hardly ever, but like sometimes I'll sell a knife that I love and then it's gone and I actually don't even miss it that much. It's like I've moved on. I'm on to the next thing. And if it hits me later that I miss it, maybe I'll try to buy one back or something. But with this, it was like immediate. I was like, oh, it pains me that I don't have it for a little bit. So I'm hoping that they're fairly quick with it. I imagine they probably will be, but I've sent it back to them and he has assured me that there will be zero blade play on it, which is really, really cool. I genuinely like that he took the time to watch it, immediately responded to me, and made certain that like I don't know. He could so easily have A, not watched the video, or B, just been like, oh, this guy's trying to dump on my product and say it it has a little blade play or something, even though I know because I'm the maker, it doesn't. Like some people would be too prideful. I don't know. um, but he was just very, very cool and approachable about it and insisted that I send it to him so that he can make it what they say it is. And I respect that and I like it. So there will be an update video when it comes back. um, I don't know. I probably won't do like a re-unboxing or whatever. I'll probably address it in the full review because that'll be logically what comes next. But when I do that review, I'll talk about whether there's actually absolute zero blade play, which is exciting because the idea of that knife getting even better than it already was is dumbfounding. I love that knife so much. All right, so let's tackle another subject. I was hoping to keep this at about an hour. We'll see if I can if I can make that work. So I wanted to talk about how knife buying has changed for me a little bit, like my buying patterns and habits, right? So I could start anyway. Oh, I'm back. Okay. So if I went back to like the beginning of knife buying, then it would be like gun show stuff, things that were like knives attached to brass knuckles, like things that I was buying when I was a kid that I could get my dad to say yes to were the original knives that I was buying. And they were like fantasy knives and terrible, poorly made, bad materials, like just looked cool or whatever. And I also bought some nice things because I grew up going to like Cold Steel parking lot sales, and stuff like that. I think the first knife that I always forget about this for some reason, but the first knife that I remember buying for myself that I kind of saved up for, was the Kershaw Leak. And I had seen it in person at a couple of like gun show booths, but I didn't have the money when I was at that gun show. And then like it took me probably a month or two to save up. And then I went to this store. I don't think it's there anymore in Simi Valley where I grew up. It was called True Edge. And they were like a airsoft and cutlery and spy equipment store, which I'm sure you can imagine. I was probably, I don't know, 12 or something at the time. Um, that was a very exciting store for me. And so I went in there and I had saved up, I want to say it was like $70 or something, which to me was insane to be paying myself for a knife, but I wanted it so bad. It was assisted opening, which was so cool back in whatever year that was. Would have been early 2000s, right? It was like, wow, this thing is nuts. And so I went and I bought that knife and I carried it like crazy for forever. And then I ended up, um, I had some cold steels. The most meaningful one was probably when I was like 15 or 16. I got an AK-47 model cold steel at a parking lot sale that was dirt cheap because it had a ding in the handle. And it was the kind that had like the Axis style lock. I feel like they stopped doing that. They ended up making them backlocks, but it had like a wave opening feature and it was an Axis style lock. and I loved that knife. That knife was awesome. I one of these days I'd like to find another one of that exact knife and buy it just for like, I don't know, for memory's sake. But anyway, so I've been buying knives for a really long time, right? But then I've been in the hobby of like the Instagram side of knife collecting, or knife enthusiasm, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, for a couple of years. And that started because I think I was just trying to think of what I wanted for my birthday to like ask my wife for one year, a few years back. And I had like a Benchmade my dad had gifted to me, the Sentinel. I had a ZTO 350 that my wife had gifted me when we were dating. And I was trying to think of what else I wanted. So I started researching zero tolerance knives because I knew I really liked my ZTO 350. And then I stumbled upon it was like on sale. I think they had discontinued it, the ZTO 620, the Tanto version of that Emerson collab. It was on sale on Blade HQ. And so I was doing some research, found that it was a good deal. It was within what I could reasonably ask my wife to get me. And so I asked her for that. That's what she got me, and I was stoked about it. But I didn't stop researching after that. I like that sent me down a rabbit hole of wow, there's a lot more out here than Benchmade and Spyderco and ZT, because I was kind of like those and Cold Steel and then budget stuff, Kershaw and CRKT and stuff like that were what I was aware of, right? So I just kept researching. I fell down the rabbit hole of like knives on bearings with like a ceramic detent and what must that feel like, and then learning about blade steels. And I remember learning about M390, and at the time it was like, wow, M390. The first knife I got with M390 was a Wii. I don't remember the number of it. It was back when they had star-shaped hardware. It was a cool Warncliffe slender little sucker, and it was on bearings and had M390, and it was just like so cool. And yeah, I went down this rabbit hole, and then I found out that on Instagram there was like this buy sell trade market, and then there's Reddit that does the same thing, and then on Facebook there's knife groups. And so then as I got deeper and deeper into the hobby, it was like for a while buying, selling, and trading was a lot of fun for me. When I could find a deal on something that was interesting enough to me that I at least wanted to check it out, and I knew it was kind of below market, I would just like, sweet, I'm going to buy that. And then I'd check it out. And if I loved it, it would stick for a while. If I didn't, then I'd either trade it into something else the same, or maybe even because I got it a little low, I'd come up a little bit, and I like kind of worked my way up, revolving the same money through the hobby over and over by trading and buying strategically and then selling when I could. And I just like had a lot of fun with mostly knives that I bought on the secondary. I was hardly buying new. And then I got to a point where it was like, ooh, but there's like sprint runs and exclusives of Spydercos that I really want. And if I don't get those new, then I'm hosed. And so I started buying sprints and exclusives and stuff. And I got kind of hooked on Spyderco, and especially like the Para 3, I had quite a few of. I went through a lot of sprints and exclusives and modding them and building them. And like, it was a lot of fun. And then, yeah, I got more and more into like buying things when they would drop, and like pre-ordering things now and then. And I still did a lot of buying on the secondary and all that. But then when I started my channel, it became my patterns really didn't buy that much. It was or didn't change that much. It was more just the frequency at how fast I was going through things, because I was doing multiple uploads a day, especially at the beginning. And so you imagine even doing a couple videos per knife, an unboxing, first impressions, and a full review, plus maybe some comparisons or whatever. Even doing all of that around each knife that came in, if you're doing 60 videos in a month, that's a lot of knives you need to have. So there were loaners that I took, which definitely helped, but I was also just like, I was buying, selling, and trading like crazy. And so I've found the retailers that I like to buy from. I love ordering from River's Edge Cutlery and Knife Joy and Cutlery Shop, and DLT is a great one. There's a few that I really, really like. And so it was a mixture at that point of buying new stuff as it was coming out, only if I wanted it. I never got into the cycle of like, because something is coming out, I need to get one to review. No, I don't want to play that game because it's not interesting to me. And I just really want to review the things that are at least interesting to me for some reason. Just because Civivi dropped another 4 models this month, I don't need to check them all out. Like, I just don't care. So I kept buying a lot of the new things that were coming out, but also hunting things that had had my interest for a long time that I'd never really like gotten to. And then once my channel was monetized, especially while I was still working and the monetization money was just kind of extra, I was like dumping that into buying more new things. So I was starting to flush a little bit of new money into the hobby, not all of it, but some of it. And so, yeah, I've been in this cycle for a long time of like buying frequently and trying a lot of things, which is so much fun. But in the last like probably 2, 3 months, realistically, I've kind of slowed it down a little bit, and I've been hunting things that just feel more meaningful for some reason. And it like part of that is starting to venture into the customs realm a little bit where things cost a lot more. Um, and part of it is also like I started to catch myself not enjoying really great knives as much as I could have because I was so like I once I finish the review, I've got to be on to the next thing. And like I want to be able to take time with the knives that I love and enjoy them because it's still a hobby for me. On top of it being me making videos, it's still a hobby. So I've slowed down so that I can enjoy the knives that I love. And I think that's valuable for my reviewing too, because like there are knives that are some of my favorites, and I want to keep them fresh on my mind as I try new things. Because if I'm only comparing what I'm reviewing now against what I reviewed last because it's freshest in my mind, it's not as balanced as reviewing it against the things that are my favorite. That'll probably keep me kind of harsh in a way. um, but it'll also like I like that perspective of looking at things that are new for their maybe it probably sounds harsh, but like for their worthiness to exist next to the things that already are. Um, and so if there's a knife like the Protect Malibu that to me is a phenomenal knife. The most reasonable gripe that I hear a lot against the Malibu is just how hard it is to get one because so many people want them that when they drop, they're gone so quick. But like if I don't carry the Malibu relatively regularly, and then I'm reviewing whatever knife that I'm reviewing at the moment, it'll be harder to like accurately compare it against the Malibu unless the Malibu has been in my pocket recently and I'm refreshing my mind on how good it really is. Um, so yeah, I like having the ability to carry the things that I want to carry in addition to carrying what I'm trying to review. And I've had a ton of fun chasing some customs or high-end limited production or however you want to divide it up. But some of these knives that cost four figures, which is like the most unexplored territory for me because I've only had a few knives at this point that are in that range, and I've just been buying the ones that I want the most. Like I'm still not trying to get things just because there's hype behind it or whatever. I want to get the knives that if there's hype behind it, I've bought into it. It's not just I see people talking about it, so I have to have it on the channel. It has to be something that I want. And I guess another element, now that I'm looking down at the table and I see the Avant right in front of me too, is the Avant has been in my pocket more than any other knife since I got this prototype a couple months ago now. I've carried this knife way more days than I haven't. Um, yeah, only in the last few weeks have I not had it in pocket for an entire day at a time. For the first like month and a half, it was the knife that I was reaching for most. There were other knives that I was reviewing, so I was giving some attention to, and I'd carry it along with another knife. But it took like I don't know, it took something for me to be able to a couple weeks ago like let it not go out in my pocket to stay at home on my desk when when I was carrying other things. Um, and so I think that's also kind of changed my perspective a little bit to like now that I have a knife design of my own and I'm enjoying it so much because I designed it for my pocket for me to use, like it's to my taste and preferences. Um, it's made it less alluring to try other knives that I feel are kind of in the same like market position or category. Um, and I think I'll get over that in time. Right now, it's just still very exciting to me to have my own design, but I also don't want to judge other people's knives against my own design because that feels even less fair. It's like this weird thing that I'm doing, but I'm trying to stay objective in my reviews. And the best way that I can think to do that is to just continually try to buy the things that excite me the most, to buy the things that I actually want the most. Because I like researching is one of the most fun parts of the hobby for me. The unboxing is special and getting the new thing is a lot of fun. But sometimes it's not even quite as fun as all the research that led up to it. Like there's something to be said for scouring the internet for listings to see if there's different pictures and reading the specs and seeing what videos are already up on a knife and trying to see if there's a video from the maker that's going to be kind of salesy and like, this is what the knife is, we hope you buy it, versus reviewers, and like seeing what is out there and trying to learn as much as you can. And then in the midst of that, making buying decisions like adds validity. Research without planning on buying something isn't fun for me, but like the research is it's such a good time for me as part of the hobby. Um, and so if I'm buying things based on anything other than that authentic like research, it feels wrong. And when I'm researching something and I find a reason why I'm pretty confident I'm not going to like it, it doesn't make sense for me to buy it. At least personally in my own brain. I don't know how much sense this all makes. I guess I'm trying to kind of flesh it out here live, but yeah, knife buying feels different for me right now than it did just a few months ago. I think it's the pace more than anything. I think it's the frequency at which I'm pulling the trigger, because I never stopped buying knives that were interesting to me. I can't think of one knife that I have purchased since having the channel because of the channel, right? Sometimes having the channel makes it way easier to say yes and like, great, I'll make content about it. Like it's easier to justify, right? But there hasn't been anything that it's like, oh, I just need to review that because that video will do well or something. Like I just don't have I don't know, that's not me. But yeah, I'm slower about it now. I'm taking my time a little more, and that feels good. It also feels really good to let myself carry the things that are in my knife case that I already love. Like today, I carried my Holt Haptic, and I don't think I've done the full review yet on this new Holt Haptic that I have. I've reviewed the knife before because it's my second one, but I'll probably do an updated full review soon now that I have this one and I've carried it so much more. But like a couple months ago, I would have made sure already that I'd finished up this review so that I could free up the space and like the mental space too of knowing that's on my list of things I still need to review. I would have gotten it done and I would have moved on, and it would have gotten carried maybe once since. But I carry this knife pretty frequently because I freaking love my haptic. it's a great reminder of how excellent a knife can be. Like especially a flipper only knife, it doesn't get much better in my opinion than a Holt Haptic. Um, and so I enjoy the days where I let myself carry it. And I carried a secondary today. That's a knife that I'm working on reviewing. But yeah, anyway. So I guess that's me trying to put, not in a nutshell, but out there, how my knife buying strategies, or whatever you want to call it, have evolved slightly over time. And maybe it's more of just like something that I feel internally than something that's super noticeable. But I do feel like I have a different relationship with what I pull the trigger on right now. And the knife shows, I guess, are part of it too, because I want to make sure I've got money when I get to the show. So I'm pumping the brakes a little more on like on my live tonight. Someone was asking if I got the new Sharp by Design React collab knife. I forget the name of it now here in the moment, but Brian Nadeau's Sharp by Design production stuff that he has React do. And I would have loved to grab one of those, but Blade West and CCKS are both right around the corner. So dumping money into a pre-order right now doesn't make much sense for me. So a lot of it can be timing in ways like that. But anyway, that's where we're at. So the last thing I wanted to tackle, we're over an hour, whatever. This probably end up going another 10 minutes, but I'm curious. And if any of you have made it this far and are now willing to give me some feedback, awesome. You're a trooper, but I'm curious about the way people who subscribe to my channel and follow me on Instagram and all that kind of stuff would feel about me doing more merch, because I feel this like resistance to it personally. If I'm being transparent and honest, I feel weird about the idea of like selling stuff that's about my channel. I struggle with the idea of like having a Patreon. Shout out to my Patreon patrons because they're awesome and I don't do nearly enough for them. But like it just feels weird to me. But at the same time, I recognize, and I'm not trying to say this from like a conceited, like humble brag kind of thing or whatever, but I recognize that there are some people who, when I do put out things like on my Teespring shop, I have some t-shirts that people can purchase, like people buy those. And that astounds me that people want merch from my channel, like it's bearded gear stuff. That's weird that other people would like to have that, to me, in my brain. But I get it when I try to remove myself from it, because the friends of mine who create stuff like Niche Designs, Nick Rogers, I've talked about him a lot tonight, I feel like, but he has an awesome t-shirt shop now that you can order from, and the stuff ships straight from the manufacturer, I think. But they're great t-shirts. He's got all of his "If You Know, You Know" shirts, which I think I've got one in every color so far. I have 3 of them. I have a blue one, a black one, and the maroon one, which is awesome because he used my name for that shirt. So that makes me feel even better about it. But I also have his "It's Not Yours Unless It Bites You" shirt. And like, I plan on getting more of his shirts, not just because he's a buddy, but also because I like those shirts and they're fun for me as a knife guy. And I don't know, like I bought a Hawk shirt at the show. I have a Chavez shirt. I've got Spyderco shirts. I've got like, I'm wearing a Holt Blade Works shirt right now. I like having shirts for knives that I like, or companies that make knives that I like. And I also like shirts that come from like friends of mine in the community, um, and stuff like that. And yeah, like the only challenge coin I've ever bought was because it was a buddy of mine who designed it. And it's like, that's cool. And I get it. And I feel like he's a friend and I respect his work. And so I get that there's like an element of that. And a lot of people, much like me, want to surround themselves with things that remind them of their hobby, their passion, if you will. Like if I'm wearing this Holt Blade Works shirt out and about, and it hasn't happened yet with this shirt, but if somebody is like, "Oh, I love the Holt Spectre" or whatever, out in the wild, just at the mall or something, I would be floored. I'd be like, "There's another person here who knows what that is. That's awesome." Like that's cool to me. Um, so I get it to an extent, but I also just want to be very, very careful that I don't seem like I'm like asking for something by creating products. I guess that's where I have to draw the line in my mind. Like I feel really cringy if I'm like shamelessly self-promoting too much and always dropping some new thing that has my logo on it and expecting people to go wild over it. That feels weird and strange and kind of wrong to me. Like that's just not the way that I'm wired. Um, but people seem to be interested in it and want it. Like every time I have a couple of hats that I had made, and the thread color is not what I wanted it to be, and so I never went forward with it. But I had a couple samples made of bearded gear hats, just have my logo. I did one that has a camo bill on a black hat, and then I did one that's like all desert camo. Whenever I've worn those in videos, I've gotten comments. I shouldn't say whenever, because there may be a video out there where it hasn't happened and I don't want to sound anyway. It's happened quite a few times where I've worn those and people have been asking me like, when can I get one of those hats? And so I've put some feelers out there. There are some hats that I could have made. I can try another vendor where they can hopefully get the thread color right, or maybe it'll be a leather patch or whatever, and I could do some hats. But it's also like, then if I buy freaking, most of them are going to be like a minimum order quantity of something like 15 hats, and the cost per hat to me is going to be like $20 after everything, right? Plus I'm going to have to pay, most of them want like a setup fee of $100. So then I have to buy 15 or 20 hats at like $20 a piece. I have to pay $100 to have the thing set up so that they have the design. And then I have to ship those. Shipping a hat isn't simple or easy in terms of what box it fits in and all that. And it's like, I don't know how much I want to deal with that. But then having somebody drop ship it, like that's why I've been using Teespring. Because because they handle it. I don't have to ship that stuff. I'm not going to deal with that for onesie twosie shirt orders. Like, my brain also functions in such a way that it's like it has to be worth my time. So if I ordered a big batch of t-shirts and it was profitable enough and I made enough money in it, then sure, I would do that. But I don't know that that's what I want to do. I don't know that I want to become a hat and t-shirt shop. that's that's not my vision for being a YouTube knife reviewer. Um, but people like bearded gear. People like the logo. People like holes are greater than studs. Speaking of which, I added a new shirt to my shop that says holes over studs in kind of a cool font that I dig. And I ordered 2 different colors of it for myself because I want to wear that shirt. But like, I don't know. I just don't know that it makes that much sense to take the next step and like go from having a simple Teespring shop where people can order some t-shirts that are decent, and I order samples of them whenever I put a new design up there so that I make sure it's a good shirt. But like going from the step that I'm at using that to taking it to now I have to bring in inventory and worry about shipping it and taking orders. And I don't want to build a site right now. I've got enough going on that I don't want to do that. And yeah, to deal with shipping, and then if something gets damaged, and like there's all these stressors around taking it to that level that I don't know. So I guess my curiosity is, if you're someone who's listening to this, and again, you've made it to this point, if you think, like, tell me what you think. Would you be interested in merch? And don't, please, 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 do not think that you're being really nice, and that you're like helping me in some way by saying like, yeah, you totally should. Just what would be way more helpful is like an honest answer of not trying to toot my horn in any way, but saying like, yeah, hats would be cool, or yeah, shirts would be cool. And if you say that, like, because you actually would be interested in getting one, because that's one of the pitfalls of the internet. I think sometimes like you'll see someone put in their stories like, I don't know, are people interested in such and such sticker if I make them? And then you get 1,000 votes for yes, and it's a yes or no. And then like the product drops and 30 of them sell. It's like, stop pumping that guy up if you're not actually into it. So yeah, if you're genuinely interested in, like, if I were to have hats made, a specific tangible thing, and it would cost probably at least $30 for me to even be able to do it, maybe a couple bucks more, then like, let me know. Or if shirts are more your speed and you think I should do some where I do like maybe limited runs of shirts or something cool like that, where it's like, I'm going to bring in 50 of these or 100 of these or whatever, and I'm going to sell them one time only, and then these shirts are out in the wild, and that's kind of cool. Like, let me know if that's something you're into, or if you're more like me and you think merch for a relatively small YouTube channel on the level of having to have a site and ship it and all that kind of stuff seems a little bit not totally worth it. Because like, if I do it, I want to do it properly, right? I don't want to half-ass it. I'd rather actually try to like create a site, maybe have some inventory, maybe do drops. I don't know how it would most make sense, but I'd like to have a site and treat it kind of like a business so that it would be efficient and it would function well. I just don't know that that's totally worth it. So yeah, let me know honestly what you think about that if you're still listening and it's of any interest to you. But maybe that was a weird note to end on. I feel like I've done a decent bit of kind of maybe self-reflection as I've talked these things out tonight. So hopefully this wasn't unbearable to listen to. Maybe it was insightful. Maybe some of you have similar thought processes or wanted to get inside my head for some reason. But yeah, this is, it's good for me, I think, to do this, if nothing else. Yeah, my next podcast, I will have a guest. That's going to be fun. I'll also pretty soon, I've got scheduled to be on the Knife Junkie podcast with Bob again. So be on the lookout for that. I'm not sure when it'll go live yet. I'll make sure I announce it when he lets me know and all that kind of stuff. But I'll be on, I think, in a lot of ways to talk about Left Concepts and how everything has gone with the Avant and my first time with a knife design venture and all that kind of stuff. So it should be pretty interesting if you want to get an even more in-depth look at that. I know I've done an episode here on my podcast with Ryan where we deep dove on Left Concepts and what it was like to create the Avant as the two of us. And I tried to make sure he had a lot of room to talk so people could get to know who he was. But this Bob the Knife Junkie one probably be more of a peek inside my head, I guess. Not that my thoughts are pretty much any different from Ryan's on it, and I talked a lot on my podcast too, but it should be fun. And Bob's a great interviewer, so I'm sure he'll get some really fun, interesting tidbits out of me. And yeah, we'll talk about the progress on the project and where we're at and all that kind of stuff too. So anyway, thanks for listening, guys. You're awesome. If you're watching on YouTube, thanks for watching. Appreciate you as always. And yeah, let me know if you've got feedback for me specifically on the merch thing, but anything else, shoot me a message on Instagram, or if you're on YouTube, comment down below, or whatever is easiest for you. And we'll see you guys on the next one. Thanks, everybody.